Last year, Plugin Alliance launched their subscription model. It's $24.99 a month or $249.99 a year. It is really the best deal going in the audio world right now, where you get over 100 plugins. If we come down here, we'll choose Bundle Products, and you can see everything you get from guitar simulators to consoles, EQs, you name it, special effects, some synths. So let's take a look at it inside of Accent. Here I have two files. The first one is a mix minus drums, and the second one is the MIDI file that's actually the drums that were played into the song. So first, let's take a listen to the mix minus drums. Okay, pretty heavy track. Next, let's take a listen to the drums with no processing. The drums already sound pretty good, but they're not going to fit into the aggressive sound that we're looking for. One of the greatest benefits of using Accent is the ability to use third-party plugins within the mixer. And in this particular tutorial, we're going to look at using only the Plugin Alliance subscription to mix drums into this song. Let's take a listen to the kick with no processing. The kick sounds good, but not aggressive enough to fit into this song. So I'm going to choose to use the SSL 4000E series here, and I'll just unbypass it. And you can see that I'm boosting a ton of high frequency, about 5K. I'm cutting out a ton of mid frequency, and I'm boosting a ton of low frequency. This is going to give us that really subby, aggressive attack sound that we're looking for. Let's take a listen to it with processing. I'll turn it off. And then I'll turn it on. That really gives us that attack and sub that we're looking for. Next, on the kick out mic, let's take a listen to it with no processing. So we can hear that this is more of a sub mic than it is an out mic. So I chose to use the BX Digital V3 on this particular channel because it gives me a low pass filter at 12 decibels per octave, and I can bring it all the way down to 85 hertz. Some other plugins don't really allow you to do that, but that's why I like this plugin and that's why I chose it. I'm also using a low shelf and boosting just a ton at around 46 hertz. Let's take a listen to it without processing, and then I'll turn it on with processing on. So you can definitely hear that we're adding a lot more low frequency, and we're getting rid of some of that woody lower mid sound that was there before. Let's listen to them together. Now we have some real sub action as well as a lot of attack. Let's head over to the snare. Now for the snare, I'm actually layering two drums. If I come over to stage view and I'll click on the first snare, we can see that I'm using the Galaxy Superphonic from the Space Cabin Audio Galaxy library. And the second snare I'm using is the Evil Joe Barisi Kit 5 snare from Platinum Samples. I absolutely love the way these two snares layer together, which is why I'm choosing to use them. Let's head back over to Mixer View, and let's listen to just the top of Snare Mic 1 with no processing. On this drum, I'm also choosing to use the SSL 4000E series, and you can see that I'm boosting some at 3K, and I'm also giving a massive boost at about 100 hertz. I find that in and around 100 hertz, it depends on the fundamental of the snare, but that's where you can get some real body out of the snare, some of that really thud that some snares really need. So I'll just unbypass this plugin, and let's take a listen to it with the processing on. And I'll unbypass it. So we've brightened it up a lot and added a lot of that low frequency to give it a little bit more aggression. Now, on the Noble and Cooley snare from the Evil Joe Barresi library, I'm also using the SSL 4000E series. Let's take a listen to it in bypass. That's a good sounding drum. I'm going to unbypass it, but before we do, let's take a look at the EQ. You can see that I'm boosting at a different place in the high frequency, and you'll find that with snare drums, you're going to have to move where you're boosting or cutting depending on the fundamental of the drum. If you want to know more about EQ, you can see our 3-part Learning to EQ series on our blog at spacecabinaudio.com. So you can see that I'm boosting here just probably at about 4,200 or so, and I'm boosting fairly aggressively. I'm about 5 dB or so, and I'm doing something I would almost never do on any snare, but for whatever reason, when this snare and the other snare and the overheads and the rooms combine, this really just gave it that extra little something that I was looking for. So I'm boosting at about 700 hertz, and I'm boosting just a ton, which, like as I said, I would never normally do this, but when you're EQing, sometimes you make moves based on the whole of the parts instead of in solo. And you'll also notice that I'm boosting a ton of low frequency, but this time, for this drum, it's at about 150 hertz because that's where that thud really came from. Let's take a listen to it with the plugin turned on. And I'll bypass it and turn it on. Now let's take a listen to it with the top and bottom mics turned on both snares and just the close mics. Now we have that really fat snare with a lot of attack. It's bright enough to cut through, but also has enough thud to feel aggressive. Next, let's go over to the toms. Now, on all the toms, you'll notice that I'm using the BX Digital V3 Mix plugin. The reason I'm doing this is because there's no overlapping bands, and I am being very, very aggressive on the EQ with these toms. As with the other drums, I want a ton of attack, but on the toms, I actually want to pull out that boxy sound and give a lot of the fundamental frequency and a lot of the attack frequency, but not much of that stuff in the middle. I want to leave that middle section for the aggression of the bass, the vocals, and the guitars to really come through. So let's take a listen to these toms with no processing. And I'll turn the EQs on. So that's a huge difference. We go from that classic tom sound to a more modern tom sound. And when you combine these with the overheads, that's when they really start to shine. I'll just turn that on quickly so we can hear it. So you can see that they're combining really well together. On the overheads, I'm actually not doing too much to them, but I am using the Townhouse compressor. This compressor is really good. I can see why everybody hypes it up so much. It's not something that I used in the past, but I thought for this tutorial I would try it, and I think I found my new overhead compressor. So that's a good thing, I guess. There's so many plugins in this bundle that it's hard to know which one to use and how to use them. So experimentation is the fun part of actually being part of this subscription. You'll notice that I'm using a pretty low ratio of 2:1. My release is set to auto, and my attack is set to 10 milliseconds. Now, I chose the 10 millisecond attack because what I'm doing with this compressor is I'm actually trying to control the snare just a little bit. I want to kind of even it out, and the attack time of this snare is about 12 to 14 milliseconds. So when I use a 10 millisecond attack time, the compressor is actually just kind of pulling off the very end of the peak. Let's take a listen to it in bypass, and then I'll turn it on. I'll turn it off and on. You can really hear the detail being brought out in the snare a little bit more, and the kick also comes up just a smidge without affecting the cymbals too much. So it's just a light amount of compression. I'm really only hitting it about 1.5 dB, maybe 2 dB, but not too much. But it definitely does make that difference in the overall drum sound. Next, I'm going to come over to my aux1 channel, and I'm going to be using the Purple Audio MC77 compressor. This is actually being fed by bus 1-2 from the kick, snare, and toms. And if I come over here to my aux sends from my snare top, for instance, you can see that from bus 1-2, I'm running a pre-fader send over to aux1 right here. I'm doing that on the kick, snare, and toms as well. Let's take a listen to just this channel with no processing on it. And I'll turn it on. What I'm actually doing here is I'm slamming the snot out of these drums. And the reason I'm doing it is because I want the snare to have a little bit more of a feel of decay. So if I absolutely slam the snot out of this snare, it kind of squashes it like a pancake. It's really the only way I can describe it. And when you blend it in with the overall drum mix, it turns the drums into this really aggressive pumping kind of feel. Let's take a listen to just the snares mixed in with the aux. And I'll mute the aux and turn it on. Now that, in combination with the room mics, really gives the feeling of a bigger space and a lot more aggression in the sound. Next, on aux2, I'm actually running a snare reverb. And I'm using the plugin BX Rooms. And I started out with a plate sound, but I adjusted it quite a lot to my liking. Now, this is an algorithmic reverb, and I probably wouldn't use this on vocals so much, but for the drums, it has that sound, that really aggressive sound that you can only get from an algorithmic reverb. So I'll just turn it on, and let's take a listen to what it sounds like with the snares. So it definitely has that 80s verb style sound that it almost sounds gated. But when you actually put it in the whole drum mix, it sounds like part of the room, and it really opens it up. And last but not least, we have the master bus. And this is my secret weapon. The Shadow Hills bus compressor on the drums is an unbelievable tool. I simply set it to nickel, adjusted it just very little bit, and let's take a listen to the whole drum mix now. I'll turn it on and off. That small little extra bit of color really helps push these drums into the mix and drive the track. Let's take a listen to it now inside of the track. Now let's listen to it somewhere where we can hear the toms in action. Let's take a listen to a section of the song with the plugin's all-in bypass. Now let's take a listen to the same section of the song with the plugins turned on. So there's a full drum mix done using nothing but the Plugin Alliance subscription model inside of Accent. If you want to learn more about our drum libraries, you can head over to spacecabinaudio.com. And if you're just interested in learning more about drum programming or audio engineering, we also have a blog there dedicated to nothing but that. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, check out some of our drum libraries at spacecabinaudio.com.